I'm really excited to have Jim Regenor, the founder of Veritx, on our show. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Noah. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Today we're going to talk about blockchain. This is something that I've been interested in for a while. Probably screwed up doing a little bit, like thousands of other people hoping to get rich quickly on the Bitcoin craze. Um, but I'm, you know, I'm gonna want to get a real nitty gritty explanation of blockchain in this interview, and then I sort of get it, but then it's the thing I think that's a little harder to grasp is actually implementing it, and it sounds like that's what's been going on with what you're involved in. So I'm really excited to learn about that. Um, so first, I just want to get a quick overview of Veritx, and then I'm going to get your story because I've done a little research and it's pretty interesting. And then I want to really get into blockchain.
Right on. All right. So a little bit about Veritx. We established Veritx in August of 2019, but it really was birthed out of another company I had before that, which was the Blockchain Resources Group. And the technology itself was something I developed while working at Moog, which is a large tier one OEM in aerospace and defense. I subsequently left Moog and have licensed back the technology that I developed. And then Moog also partners with me in the project on Veritx. But what is Veritx? Veritx simply is, if you can think in terms of a digital parts catalog for regulated industries that reduces long lead times, increases readiness for our military and airline customers. And that's kind of the 15-second elevator pitch on what Veritx is.
Okay, so it's centers around airlines and that.
Airlines and military, and really being able to compress those long lead times. We did some POCs just to kind of give you some framing. We did some proofs of concepts with the DoD that we were able to reduce a 265-day lead time for a part for an F-15 down to 6 hours from order to delivery. So I don't have to reduce it down to hours to become a hero. I could just reduce it down to a couple days, right? But that's the type of
What would it have been at before the 6 hours?
265 days.
Wow.
So imagine having to wait. You're at Napa and you go in to buy a part for your car, and the guy goes, "Hey, great, here it is. We'll have it to you in 265." What are you doing? Find a new car, right? You're not going to sit there and wait. But these legacy systems that the DoD currently flies, a lot of aircrafts were built in the 80s, 70s, 60s, and even in the 50s with the B-52s and the KC-135 still flying. So being able to find parts becomes difficult when you think about obsolescence. The original manufacturer probably went out of business years ago, and some parts and processes have changed. So that's kind of where we stack up.
Interesting. Um, yeah. So the the Defense Department, all of our stuff. I mean, I know we are constantly spending lots of money and building things. How much of our defense arsenal is outdated?
So I won't call it outdated. We've got some good systems. They're probably been over manufactured and over engineered back when they were built, so they have a long life. But quite a bit of the fleet, better than 50% of it's legacy fleet in the Air Force, and a good amount of it in the Navy and Marine Corps legacy. And the Army's got legacy fleet, whether they're helicopters, the UH-60s and the AH-1s, the Cobras and the Blackhawks they fly, were all built, in the 80s primarily.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a couple wars under their belt, and they're tired, but they're still very usable and very effective, and still very lethal. But you need to be able to compress those supply chains so that you can increase the readiness rates. Some of the one-offs, like the B-1 bomber, they have to generate a couple airplanes to get one airborne just because of all the issues. And part of that issue is, for example, it was built by Rockwell, who went out of business or was acquired by Boeing, depending on how you look at it. And then the paper for the parts has been spread all over the place. So, being able to get one of those airplanes when it needs a spare part airborne is at times difficult. And we're trying to help our DoD customer by alleviating that burden and increasing those readiness rates. If you increase readiness rates, what do? You also increase lethality because you can put more bombs on target, the more airplanes you can generate. So.
How do you think our defense compares to other countries? Is their stuff really old as well?
Yeah, there's some even, some of the stuff that we want to retire, we can actually give to other countries.
Yeah.
So it's old, but I'll tell you, the edge that we have in the United States, and this is, kind of part of probably, the space that you're in and why we're talking, is really, we have an innovation engine in this country that's unparalleled to anywhere else in the world. So being able to come up with ways to get around a lot of these challenges really is the strength of our economy, the strength of our industrial base, and the strength of our nation.
Interesting. Because, you hear the criticism about, at least with consumer products now, we're not fixers. An iPhone breaks and we throw it out. But I guess when it's billion-dollar pieces of equipment, you're better off buying some spares. And
yeah. So we probably should do some qualifiers. We've gotten kind of down this rabbit hole. How about if I just kind of go over my background a little bit so people wonder why I'm talking about, the DoD and that sort of thing. Is that fair?
Great.
Okay. So before I came to Veritx, I spent 31 years in the Air Force as a pilot flying KC-135s and C-17s. Did a lot of different things, worked in the White House for both the Bush and the Obama administration, on the National Security Council.
I like how you just kind of rattle off like, yeah, I was part of the Security Council. Yeah, okay, next line of business. Okay, go on. I'll ask you about it.
A lot of people have more storied careers than I did. I was lucky. It's kind of eclectic. I worked in a little bit of a think tank called Checkmate at one point in the Air Force and did a whole bunch of neat things. But I ended my career running a large logistics operation. I had 15 locations in 11 countries across 3 continents. Everything from the Azores, which is out in the Atlantic, through the Med, 5 locations in Iraq and Afghanistan during the height of the war, all the way up to Manas in Kyrgyzstan. Roughly moving 570,000 tons of cargo, 63,000 airplane touches, and about 2 million people a year through that organization that I ran. And I was always wanting for parts. There was always a plane sitting somewhere going, if I just had that part, I could fly this plane or I could do what I needed to do. So when I got out of the Air Force, I went to work at Moog, which is a Tier 1 aerospace company, and I was running their military aftermarket, which was perfect for me. We had acquired then a 3D print business up in Michigan. And I said, what will 3D print enable? And I realized 3D printing would be commoditized, but it really would become an enabler for this digital Industry 4.0 schema and how industries would then interact. And from there, we kind of fell on a blockchain. And I'll talk about the scenario we developed as we get through the interview, but what led us to where we're at now and how blockchain became a very eloquent solution to a very difficult problem. I'll pause there.
Yeah, well, I could see that 3D printing, when you were in the military and you were needing all these parts, did you guys have 3D printing at the time? Or
no,
they had to machine everything?
Yeah, we did not have 3D printing. The irony is 3D printing was really invented in 1987. But really, you needed all the materials to come together with the laser science and the metals and the powders and all that, really to get to this mass adoption. And really, the thing that changed it is around 2000, 2001, the dental industry figured that out with being able to make implants and caps and crowns. And from there, it just kind of, it accelerated. And companies like EOS over in Germany and Renishaw and others really got the metal science down, the powders down. We're able to start doing powder bed laser. And there's multiple different types of 3D printing, but in the complex parts, those are probably the most popular way to do it. But all of a sudden, it started this whole chain of events. And really the whole chain of events was, what will 3D printing enable? What's the end state? What's the telos, as the Greeks would say, of, this new world as a result of this new technology? And And it really allows you, when you can couple it up with blockchain, to create what we're calling the fourth modality of logistics. So if you think in terms now, no, when you buy a part, it either comes to you on a ship, on a train, or a plane, right? That's
Yes.
kind of, or a truck, it kind of moves over the road like that. But with this new modality, we can now move digital assets anywhere in the world through the cloud, the internet, down to the point of need, and manufacture it really at the site. And that has not been something we've been able to do. If you think back to the early assembly lines, the early 1900s, there was a guy named Coase who was an economist. He wrote a paper called The Firm and said, look, we have to have these large firms because there's no trust. I can't trust my supply chain is going to create everything the way it's supposed to be. So I need to be able to centralize this assembly and push things out. I think a really good example is the 787 when they got the first forward plug of the fuselage from Vought at the time. It did not fit what Boeing had made for the plug. It was off by a couple millimeters. But think about that. Now you're doing, you're making a large assembly, the whole front cockpit and everything, and it has to marry up to what Boeing had put together. It's off a few centimeters. A few millimeters. You go, no big deal. Well, yeah, huge deal.
What a cluster.
And so at the end of the day, Boeing ended up buying Vought and putting a lot of their 787 production down in Charleston as a result of that. That's where it was at. But now all of a sudden with this blockchain, which is when you marry up blockchain with a digital asset, you can create a unit of value. You can democratize that trust and push it out to the edge and manufacture on the edge, and that's what we're doing.
All right, Jim. I kind of get this. Because I've made a study of it, but we need to start from square one here. Blockchain. I give us the 5-year-old version. Blockchain, Bitcoin. I know then we can get into tokens and all this stuff, and people. This is going to go over people's heads unless we can zero in.
Sure. So the upside is the 5-year-old version is really the version. So it works okay.
Good.
I'm a geographer by trade, so you don't require anything special education-wise to really understand what we're doing. But when you think in terms of blockchain is really just a distributed ledger. So think about you and I, and we'll take a third party, somebody else. We all record, I owe somebody $10. We all record that I owe somebody $10. So there's 3 of us in the scheme. All right? But I want to cheat you. I write down on my ledger, on my notepad, that I owe you $9. And so you're going to come back and you're going to go, well, Jim, you really owe me $10. I'm going to go, no, I wrote down $9. And then you're going to turn to the third party and you're going to say, what do you have written down? And the 2 of you have $10 written down. So by default, the truth then becomes $10. So I really owe you $10. So if you think in terms of a distributed ledger of information through all kinds of nodes, where that in order to defeat that ledger, or to corrupt it, or to change an entry, you have to simultaneously change 51% at exactly the same time with the exact same amount. And we're talking about hundreds and sometimes thousands of nodes. It's nearly impossible to do. In fact, it is impossible today. So it's an append-only ledger. So let's say that you want to go in, and let's say I really owed you $10.50. And we all agree that I owe you $10.50. Well, what we'd be able to do is go in and we would all record another page on top of the one that said $10, and we'd say it's $10.50 now. We couldn't go back and actually erase the $10 on your pad. We would have to create another page on top of it. So you see everything that's happened, and it's an append-only type of a schema. The other piece it's transparent. So anybody, let's say there's a fourth party, and he wants to look at all of our ledgers. So all those notepads and all the different pages stacked up on it would be visible to that other person. So now you have transparency, you have an append-only ledger, and the last thing is it's immutable. So it creates trust by the fact that I can't go in and change it, I can only append only, it's transparent, and it represents the truth once we have consensus, which was your page with the third party page. So now all of a sudden you've got a schema that allows contracts to be written and other things that you can say, hey, look, I can track every single thing that's ever happened to this. So it's pretty cool. It's like a pedigree. You can track all the way through the lineage of that asset. Now, how do you unmoor that from cryptocurrency? Because typically when everything started, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, was about Bitcoin and all this stuff last 2 years ago when it went through the roof to 17,000. People's grandmothers were buying Bitcoin, which is kind of funny. But when you uncouple Bitcoin currency from that immutable, transparent record or ledger, you now create a very powerful tool that can be used for a lot of different things. Whether it's going to be used for expediency in transactions, whether it's going to be used to track and trace aircraft parts, whether it's going to be used to track and trace foodstuffs. A great example is Walmart, last year, told their lettuce suppliers after an E. coli outbreak that in order to sell your lettuce at my Walmart store, you're going to have to be on my blockchain. In other words, I'm going to have to be able to see every single thing that's happened to that lettuce before it went on my shelf. So in the event that something bad, an E. coli outbreak comes, I can track it very quickly and mitigate the risk to my consumer base. And oh, by the way, if you don't get on my blockchain, then you can't sell, which is kind of cool. So depending on where you are in the value chain, you can use that to help shape behavior. Now, let's say that lettuce supplier's transporter said, the guy he puts the lettuce on the truck and it takes it a while. Let's say that guy said, hey, in order to use my truck, you're going to have to be on my blockchain. The lettuce supplier would go, yeah, that's fine. I'll find another truck, all right? Because he's not in the right place in the value chain to help shape that behavior. On the other end of the value chain, let's say that lettuce supplier now sells to Kroger, and Kroger comes to him and says, hey, in order to sell at Kroger, you must be on the Kroger blockchain. Now that lettuce supplier is going, well, how many blockchains do I have to be on? And, oh, by the way, I have to pay for this. I'm not getting funds from anybody, so I have to absorb this cost. So what you saw was a consolidation in a blockchain consortia around what's called Food Trust, which is put on by IBM. So you see others using that to try to consolidate the market to create a single pipe for that lettuce supplier.
Jim.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of get it, but I want to physically understand. Are there people like sitting at their computers that are monitoring this, that are, like, how is it physically? And you're saying this infrastructure is here right now and people are using this?
Yes. Okay. A lot of people are using blockchain today, and it runs in the background. You don't see that it's blockchain. You'll have a UI or the user experience or the user interface, and you'll log on to the website and you'll upload the data. A lot of times, if you think of kind of an IoT, Internet of Things solution, you'll have a QR code or barcode that you're able to, track that information. So you'll take your scanner or whatever and say, okay, I just picked this head of lettuce from here. Here's everything that's been applied to this lettuce. Here's all the different chemicals and everything I've used. You're following that as you're doing it. So every time you do something, it's uploaded and attached against what's in your field. And then as it moves, another ledger page is written and said, okay, it got on this truck and it went to this distribution warehouse. But that's all data that's being tracked, and there's a humanality to it. It's either somebody's pushing the data in, or there's a sensor that's saying, okay, it's at this location. And it gets you all the way to the store. In our case, with an aircraft part, it actually starts with the initial requirement. So somebody will come out and say, hey, Jim, I need you to make this part. Here are the requirements. It has to have these material properties. It has to be machined this way. It has to be made out of this material on this type of machine. We then take that part, we record all that information into a blockchain, and we now move it goes to a designer, goes to somebody on the manufacturing side, there's some quality inspections, all that stuff that happens along the way is all recorded in individual pages on that ledger. So when the part is ready to become a physical part, everything that's ever happened to that part left of the transition from a digital to a physical design to a digital design of physical part is recorded on blockchain.
Okay.
Today,
so it's recorded. It's recorded in this central. No, it's not a centralized computer.
No, it's a decentralized.
It's decentralized. So yeah. Everybody that has all of these computers, it's not actually people, right? It's just a whole bunch of computers, decentralized, and they're all keeping track of the data at the same time, so nobody can question the other. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So that you have distributed trust. So for example, if your machine goes down, I know that the data is still alive somewhere else. Or if somebody attacks, a couple machines, I know that the truth still resides somewhere else. There's a couple different ways to establish truth, but it becomes complicated if we go there. Just realize that the majority of people say it's the truth, and the nodes say it's the truth, and it's the truth. But so think about this with aircraft parts. Today, all that happens, but it's one stream of information on paper at the site where the part's being manufactured. So now let's say I've converted that into a physical part and I now ship it to Boeing. But I forget a couple of the pages. They fall out, something happens. Well, Boeing receives it and they go, I'm missing some pages here. I need this in order for it to go on the airplane. It's required by the FAA. I have to have this information. This part now becomes a paperweight until I can get that fixed. Airbus told us very early on that they spend upwards of $40,000 a part when it comes with incomplete or bad paperwork, trying to get it sorted out. Mm-hmm. Now think in terms of your synchronized production facility, and you need this part in order to put it into assembly, which then goes into a system. Well, that's all slowed down, right? And the things that companies want to keep off of their balance sheet really work against you. For example, inventory. Every company wants to minimize inventory because it's a draw on their balance sheets, downward pressure. SG&A, downward pressure. So I only want to maintain as many as I need to keep my production machine going, maybe a couple spares. But now all of a sudden, if something happens, now I'm consuming and nothing's coming in, right? The other thing you can do is if something happens and I have to change it, let's say that there's a design flaw and I realize that. Well, now I can very quickly look at where it's already been placed and what airplanes I might have to go take it back out of. So you can do what's called rapid forensics. The other piece we're doing is using the blockchain force authenticity of data. So I'm able to track the data all the way through and make sure that nobody's corrupted my data, that digital file, and then process. I can build a digital workflow that says all these steps have to be taken in order for it to be a good part. So I track it all the way through that. That's what's on the ledgers. And then finally, we can use it to say this is an authentic part. There's about $3 billion a year of counterfeit parts that get into the aerospace supply chain. All right.
And typically, it's a terrible place for a bad part to go.
Well, yeah, high consequence of failure, right? I mean, the airplane falls out of the sky. Fortunately, airlines build airplanes with triple redundancy now. But think in these terms. You now have a part. A counterfeit is typically non-complex, but you now have a way to make complex parts without a big draw on cost of production. You don't have to go build a huge factory or machine shop when you can 3D print parts.
Yes.
So now all of a sudden you're incentivizing the counterfeiters to start counterfeiting more complex parts so they can extract more money. But with our system, you're able to take that part and we can tell you if it's authentic or not, right?
Because the machines are hooked into the blockchain system?
Well, we have an SSI, so self-sovereign identification for the machines and the people as they touch it. So that gives you kind of the chain of custody. But once it's delivered on your shelf, you kind of lose that. So what we're able to do is look at the part itself and doing some tech that I don't want to describe here, but we're able to take a high-res photograph of the part and say, okay, this is an authentic part by looking at different attributes of the part, as opposed to you have a part that looks like it, but it's not attributable. And we link that authentication or fingerprint, so to speak, to the part number, whether it's a QR code or serialization or whatever. So if you were to pick it up and scan it and it says this part exists, either the part in your hand or a part somewhere on the shelf or in the fleet is counterfeit. So you can mitigate that risk very quickly. And that's got tremendous value when you think about it. As you said before, it's a high consequence of failure. If part fails on an airplane and you're flying, right? So.
Wow. And so as far as the infrastructure in manufacturing, it sounds like aerospace they're somewhat far along. What are we in the fourth inning, the third inning of this game?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's two tensions in play here. One is the adoption rate of additive manufactured parts.
Okay.
So right now, a traditional forging or casting will have A, B, and S-based material properties listed in a volume called MMPDS, which is maintained by the government, or Mill Handbook 5. And so the government very early on started collecting material properties, all the way from material, glue, and wood when they were making airplanes that way, through metals and composites and polymers. They stopped with additive, and now they're counting on industry to provide those aggregatable data sets to create the curves that they would build to. Now, most industry are developing material properties, but they're maintaining them as trade secret. So right now we get point approvals. The FAA will say, I approve that part, as opposed to design allowables that will say any parts within these design parameters are approved. We'll eventually get there. So I would say that tension has slowed down additive manufacturing. The other thing that's slowed down aerospace is this is probably the most technically advanced industry we have right now. However, everything's done right now with ordering and purchasing with faxes and emails and phone calls on paper.
Right, and then the ideal, if this system finally, gets to where you think it has the potential to be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, all that communication, the emails and faxes and phone, that's all going to be sort of streamlined, and you're not going to. That's not how the information is going to pass, because
so we're going to create a B2B Amazon-like marketplace for your digital and physical parts right now. That will be transactional. You won't have to submit and ask, RFPs and RFQs. You'll have a price listed. You'll have the provenance, all that paperwork or data, and you'll have the yellow tag, which says it's an airworthy part. And you have pictures of the part, and if allowed, we'll also API into the front end ERP, and we'll have real-time inventories. So we'll be able to tell you what's on the shelf, what's available. If there's a print option to it, we'll be able to, again, tell you there's a print option and sell you a digital part that you can manufacture where you need it. So we can give you all that information very quickly, and you can make a very good choice on the repair. And you can start to compress that supply chain very quickly and increase that readiness that we spoke about.
What about the price, though? Is there any negotiation, or are the machines negotiating with each other to find what the
pricing
price is?
Yeah, pricing in aerospace is a little bit weird because a lot of it has to do with volume, right? I mean, they're high-end parts, and so everybody's kind of got a different deal going on. But what we don't see is we don't see transactional sales, and we don't see competition at price. And what I mean by that is a lot of times there's aftermarket parts. So a lot of times there's two or three sources of supply available, and you don't get to see that one's $19.95 and the others. And I'm oversimplifying the prices, mind you, because the average cost is about $8,000. But one's $19.95 and the other one's $19.50 and one's $21. You don't get to be able to see that and say, well, I really like the one for $19.50. There's some other elements that would go into that contextually. One would be, we're trying to create a social strata on this too, much like a marketplace, by saying you're a 1, 2, 3, 4-star type of supplier. So if I bought one at $20.50 and it was from a 4-star supplier, that may be a better deal to me because, again, he's rated higher by kind of the transaction volume than buying one at $19.50 from a 2-star provider, right? But you'll be able to make more contextual, more granular decisions, understanding the reputation of the supplier and the price point, and being able to de-risk it yourself. And I think that's the future. In fact, I'm certain that's the future.
So all these transparent prices will be right in front of you. You'll see the reputation, and you'll see you'll see the cost. You'll see all the information on the part that you need. See, there's legacy systems that exist today, but less than 2% of aerospace transactions take place on these legacy systems because there's ghost listings. There's all kinds of problems, not real-time inventory, all kinds of problems that exist, and it really serves just as a matchmaker. It tells you the parts available, then you have to call the other company and negotiate and so on and so forth. It really slows things down. So, ideally, we like to reduce the coefficient of friction in business, to use some of my learned engineering terms. But I was a pilot, so that kind of qualifies me. I do have an engineering background, even though I'm a geographer. But so, does that make sense? Yeah, it's still very abstract, but because. So what it sounds like is that people are on computers, they're making transactions, and the blockchain process is going on, and we don't even really realize it.
Yep, that's it, absolutely. Because like I said, it's in the background. It's the scaffolding. It's kind of like the internet. Remember when the internet came around? You're a little bit younger than me, but in 1997 when e-commerce came in, everyone's like, we're an internet company, right? And everyone said that. But pretty soon, after a couple of years, you didn't have to say that because it was presumed that everybody was on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So if you think in terms of the world kind of exists so far in about three different buckets. One's digitization. So you uploaded your catalog, people are able to see what's available. Then you got digitalization. So now not only is your catalog uploaded, but you can start creating things in a 3D environment. Companies like Shapeways and others, and even Nike, you can go on and design your shoes.
Yeah,
I want
that's
this
awesome.
thread, I want this, you become a prosumer. The last bucket is what I'll call is digital transformation. It's really how do you take that digitalization and create new business models and new value for your customer in that regard. So if you think in our example, you can now create a part in a 3D CAD model and push it to a 3D printer. That's the digitalization. You're doing everything in a digital environment. The digital transformation is now being able to push that part to the point of use at the time of need and creating that new business model. That new business model is now I can digitally push my part to you. I can compress that lead time for that part. That becomes transformative. So when you think in those terms, early on, the companies that we all are going to miss here shortly, Sears, Blockbuster, and others. The stories are back. Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Redbox. They didn't buy it. They also had an opportunity at one point to buy Netflix. They didn't buy it. They didn't have a vision of the future. They were more to their traditional business model, and they didn't disrupt themselves from within, right? So most dangerous environment you can be in is somebody's at the peak of their game and go, yeah, hey, we're winning. Well, at the peak of their game, they ought to be saying, hey, look, our competitors are going to kill us. They're going to out-innovate us. What can we do to totally disrupt our business to the next level, right? So those are kind of the terms that you have to think about. So back to your question, yeah, people are on, we'll just say on a computer, with a UI, on the back end of the UI is blockchain that's doing all this sort of stuff. But they're starting to create new business models, starting to create new customer value, and really that's what's then perpetuating the explosive growth in blockchain. There's really four things in play today. Two are kind of business and two are kind of tech. The business side is how do I modify behavior? In other words, how do I get you to say, hey, look, I like blockchain. I want to kind of convert over to what I'm doing. Trust matters to me. How do I create new value? So how do I transform that new value, this trusted enterprise, into something that brings value to my customer? Those are the two business challenges. On the tech side, it's how do I scale? Because everyone will say, well, you can't scale. Well, you can scale, but how do you scale? And then two, how do I interoperate? Because there's these bunch of blockchains out there. There's not been a consolidation. So now I need to be able to move information from blockchain to blockchain. It'd be unrealistic to think Boeing or Airbus with 30,000 plus suppliers has everybody on Hyperledger or Ethereum or so on. So eventually we'll get a consolidation, right? So email is perfect.
And is that one of the things that you're working on? I
Yes.
did some.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we're looking at is interoperability. But when you look at so take your email that you use today. Your email is actually made up of 12 protocols that came through this consolidation, right? And now I'm really going to show that I'm really nerdy, but remember I'm still a geographer. But really through those protocols, people can name off the top of their head.
Wait. Go back 5 seconds. You cut out for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's 12 protocols that make up what your email is, right? So when we see the consolidation of blockchains, we'll eventually take all the goodness from all these different blockchain ideas, and they'll compress into one or two that people will use, right? Those will become the main rails. But for example, you got SMTP, TCP, and HTTPS, and those are kind of the things that you remember now about the internet. But there's many other protocols in there. So we'll see this consolidation eventually. But until then, we need to have a way to be able to, one, scale, and two, move chain to chain with information. That will matter. And those are some of the areas that we're working on. So I'll pause there.
So we have a lot of listeners that are in the aerospace business. We have a lot of job shops. We have a lot of people in automotive. If you're a job shop, say you're tier 3, in some we focus on turn parts, but in some turn parts industry, where does this affect you? Does it affect you directly, or is it only affecting the people, the next people on the food chain?
No, I think actually the tier 2s and below are the ones that this could be most impactful for, especially when they're looking at new value. And here's why. I'm a tier 3, tier 4. Can I afford to have SAP ERP? Most likely not. Can I afford to have Siemens Team Center? Most likely not, right? Those are big, expensive programs. So how do I create channels to market? How do I create new value? It's being able to come on a platform like Veritx. Remember, we're not making anything. What we're doing is stitching everything together and providing
Yes.
integrity rail, right? So if you're a job shop, you can come on Veritx, and now let's say you need a metallurgist that for titanium, and you're a job shop that you just bid on a titanium job, but you don't want to have a full-time metallurgist. We have a partner, Circle, for example, or others that can provide you a metallurgist out of this gig economy schema. We've got partners all the way across our value stream. Couple of ways to bring people to a platform. One is content. So if you're a job shop and you have IP and content you want to list, we're a catalog for that. Two is bringing services. We bring a very good portfolio of services back out to our customers. Companies like 3D Usher, that'll tell you what's the best machine powder mix, upconvert 2D paper to 3D models. Let's say you're a job shop and you're sitting in Waterloo, Iowa, and it's harvest season, and somebody comes in and says, hey, my combine's broke down, or my whatever is broke, I need this part. And they call John Deere, and John Deere, it's a 1960s combine that's still running like a champ because, when they call John Deere and they say, hey, look, we'll get you that part, it's going to be 2 weeks. And he'll be like, yeah, 2 weeks too long, I got to cut now, right? But now if John Deere can create a digital model or has that part digitized, they can push it to that job shop in Waterloo, they can print it up, give it to the farmer, and he puts it on his combine, and he's cutting again. He's cutting wheat. He's making money. So when you start thinking in those terms, there's plenty of opportunity for the sub tiers, the local job shops, to actually make money and increase value for their customers.
All right. So, a tier 4, they call Veritx on the phone, and they say, "What can you do for me?" And you would be able to, they would buy your platform, and then they would be tapped into the whole stitching.
Yeah.
How does it work in practical terms?
No need to buy. We're making a strict horizontal play here. There's a lot of companies, the big names out here, that are making these vertical plays. Buy my machine, buy my powder, buy my prototype, I'll make your part, right? They are the AOL of the early internet. All right? You're going to pay them dearly. All right? It's part of an evolution. We're going right to where the Gmail, Hotmail. We're going to give it to you for nothing. All right? So you can come on the platform. We take a small transaction fee as you do it. But what you'll be able to do is come on the platform, utilize the platform for your interaction with your customers, with your suppliers, and be able to transact. So now you're that tier 4, and let's say that you have a little bit of IP. You got 4 parts that you've been able to reverse engineer that go on a business class seat that's used by 30% of the airline industry. And you've reverse engineered those, and now you can put them up for sale, and other people can come on and buy them. The airlines and others don't want to be held hostage by the airframers. Typically, when they have to buy a part, they have to buy a kit, or there's them in production. They don't want to have to maintain inventory every single place that they land. So now all of a sudden they maintain their inventory in the most flexible form, digital, and you're that tier 4 job shop, and you're in Torrance, California, and all of a sudden, you're an airline comes in and says, hey, look, I need this buckle manufactured, or I'm going to lose use of this seat. And if I lose use of this business class seat, it's going to cost me $5,000 every time the plane lands until I can get to the buckle fix. Or I can send a digital file down that job shop. They can print it for me. We can have one of our partners, like Aerospace, which is a boutique custom delivery company, pick that up and make sure it's waiting for you at the airport. And now all of a sudden you don't lose revenue. So you can start to create these different value streams, either geographically or by capability. What works for that tier 4, saying in Torrance, is geographically they're close to the airport that needed it, LAX, right? The airline was coming in. The other thing that makes it value to them is they had the capability to actually print it, all right? So they're able to do that. So you can start seeing where you're able, based on geography, when you're trying to compress supply chain, geography matters and capability matters. And being able to stitch together the pieces. If that shop in Torrance could make the part but had no way to deliver it to LAX, it wouldn't matter. So you have to now stitch together those pieces so that you can actually service the customer at the point of need. The point of need in that example is on the ramp in LAX. So all that gets consolidated, and it's all done on the platform when you're going to go through and select, hey, I need to deliver this to LAX. Okay, who's available? And we have other large logistics.
How much is the transaction? What kind of expense?
So here's the beauty of it. So the transaction is I would say it's slightly more right now than a traditional manufactured part, but those prices are coming down with powders and so on. So you shouldn't view it as what's the monetary value. You should view it as what the opportunity value is. So the real question to ask is, if that airline is going to fly 3 more legs and lose 15,000 per leg because they can't put a body in the seat, what are they willing to pay for the part? So that makes it a little bit different. So that just-in-time phenomena actually has a kind of a value economy associated to it, and that's really, what's the opportunity cost. So let's say that now I have
this is really that's what the just-in-time economy is. That's the reason.
Yeah, it's that value cost, right? So let's say I'm the guy and I have a listing on there. It says, hey, I'm able to make this part. I'm here in Torrance, and it costs you $20. Okay, $20 for a normal order. But if you need the part within 24 hours, because remember, he's going to have machine time and availability. So it's a fairly complex process to drive it down to I can make it right now, right? That means he's got a machine with availability and so on. But let's say that you have that and you say, hey, look, if you need the part within 24 hours, it's a 4X or it's a 5X or whatever. But people will gladly pay that to have things where they need it when they need it. Yeah. If there's an opportunity to lose money if you don't have it, right? So
how's your company doing?
I need things, but I don't need it right now, or I need it right now. So you work through. So it's the difference of being Mr. Right and being Mr. Right now. So
I see. Just a couple other questions. Was somebody who's been in the military and worked for the government, do you know, is the government also using blockchain technology? Does the government not like blockchain technology because they want to be gatekeepers?
No, I would say that the government actually, our government, the current administration wants to be much more innovative and wants to leverage small business much more. They've redone the SIBR, which is how they give out small business innovation and research funds. They've rewickered that. They've increased the amounts. They've become, almost like a VC. But when they give money out, though, it's non-dilutable, so it's good to take it. But so we've done 5.
I was kind of thinking of the military because you were doing logistics in the military.
So all right, so let me address that. So think about this: what did we learn out of the current wars we're in? One is a lot of people died because of IED blasts and VBID blasts transporting commodities, right? So now there's a big push. There's a big push towards autonomous vehicles, autonomous air cover, and so on, so that you can now move things over the road and not have to risk life. But now think about this: I'm at a forward operating base, or I'm out on a ship, or I'm in a submarine, and I now need a part. Well, now we can digitally push that part to you. If you have a printer, you can make it. So now I don't have any supply chain risk in a physical sense where I'm going to list rise. In a digital sense, I do have supply chain risk. My enemy is going to try to attack my digital supply chain with the same vigor that they attacked my physical supply chain. So you have to encrypt the data and fortify the pipe, right? Which is what blockchain helps us do. Really, the pipe fortification is important, most important, best attribute of blockchain. Encryption, everybody's encrypting data now, but it's that fortification. But so think about it. So now I'm sitting at a forward operating base or a FOB, and I need a part for my F-18 because there's troops in contact, which is called TIC. There's troops in contact. I've got to get up there and fly this F-18 or lives could be at stake. Now I can push that part directly to that battle space, depending on the part, mind you, but print it, put it on the airplane, and get it in the air in a short amount of time. That's a big deal. That really changes the dynamic of what that battle space looks like, as opposed to having to wait for a supply, ship, plane, train, whatever, truck get to me. And oh, by the way, it's now has to incur risk to get to my location, right? So yeah, the DoD's all over this. They want this. They want a lot of it. They want it now. Just this past week, General Perna from Army Material Command said I need to develop digital supply chains. General Alan Day from Defense Logistics Agency published a paper last week talking about the physics of logistics, he calls it, and what that looks like with a digital supply chain and other different opportunities. So there is a big push to realize the benefit and value. And really what it does is compressing those timelines, as I mentioned before, those long lead times, increases readiness, and the result of increased readiness obviously is increased lethality, right? So yeah, to answer your question in a long-winded version, But to give you some context on kind of why it matters, yes.
Oh, I had so many questions, but I but there's too many rabbit holes to to go down. Is but I want to know just maybe just personally, like, so is Veritx? Do you guys have tokens? Are you your own currency? And how does that work?
Yeah, so to answer your question, no, we're not our own currency. We don't have tokens. But and remember, we're building the platform today, right? Because we've only done an MVP, so we're still pre-revenue as we go through. So we hope to be revenue positive by the end of the year. But so where we're at in that question is, I don't think one, the DoD is ready to pay me using a crypto transaction, nor do I think the large aerospace providers are ready to do that. But there are a couple ways that you can do it. So when you think to the future, think in terms of, are you familiar with the term tethered coin? That's tied to like the US dollar, or QCAD in Canada tied to the Canadian dollar. Those aren't things that have wild fluctuations in value like Bitcoin and others. So it's just a vehicle that's attached to the US dollar or attached to the Canadian dollar or others.
But is that an actual cryptocurrency then? If it's
Absolutely. It absolutely is.
because then it's
So
sort of but it's connected to this non
it's a
blockchain
cryptocurrency
thing.
because one, it's not printed out of paper, and two, it's not issued by the central bank, the Federal Reserve. So yes, it is a cryptocurrency. But in the future, I think businesses will want to transact very quickly. And if you think about the amount of time it
Yeah.
takes to do a foreign exchange transaction, so for example, I buy something from somebody in Italy. There's a lag in what that transaction looks like, right? A couple
Trust me,
days.
we know, yeah.
And the banks make the money off of that, right? It's sitting in a bank somewhere, and they're collecting the interest on it. So people are going to want to be able to settle transactions fast. There's a vehicle called a non-fungible token, and what that allows you to do is just think of it in terms of a contract, where two parties can come together, and at that point of when they consummate the transaction, money flows one side or the other. So using a non-fungible token, which is still connected to regular currency, whether it's a dollar or euro or whatnot, you can expedite transaction speed. So you'll see that. We will have a payment rail on the platform that will allow people to use whatever method they use today, whether it's issuing a PO. We have partners like companies like Stripe that can take a PO, that can take an invoice, that can take a credit card transaction. We'll also move into being able to do NFTs, through that venue and whatnot, non-fungible tokens. And ideally, I think in the future we'll get to where we're actually able to use tethered crypto. I don't foresee us having our own token because it's such a pain to get through the SEC requirements right now. I would spend most of my money and time on lawyers and try not to go to jail for violating one of the laws that I don't even know exists yet. So.
Bitcoin. Where do you see? Do you see? I know people have been using it more in like third world countries and stuff for a while. Do you see? And my impression is sort of like sort of like it's sort of like your gold. It's kind of like your central, like, they're all traded for Bitcoin. It's kind of the center of it all. Is Bitcoin going to be? Well, eventually you typically like will go buy things with Bitcoin or some
So
like as a consumer.
yeah. So I think you have to look at things this way. One is Bitcoin is a good store of value, right?
Yes.
Like you just said for
Yes.
gold, right? There's a lot of things that are pegged against Bitcoin, much like they used to be pegged against gold and so on. So it's a good measure there. Now the hard part for a consumer is, let's say you walk into Starbucks and you order, what do you drink at Starbucks when you go there?
A latte.
So you order a latte, right? And by the time you order a latte, she makes it and you pay for it, the price of the Bitcoin's fluctuated, right?
Yeah.
Some days it's wild swings. But so do you think Starbucks is going to be really happy if it just dropped 10?
No, I don't. That's why I'm
Yeah.
curious about the
So
viability of it all.
so it's gonna take a little while for the We've got to get out of the volatility phase, and really the volatility phase is driven by speculators. When true value is being created, the speculation won't be what drives price. Value will be the price driver. So I think you'll see a lot of the platforms that have their own tokens or currencies on, once they start creating value, we'll see a compression of volatility, or the amplitude, and it'll be much more transactional. I think we're a ways away, but there are some very good reasons to use Bitcoin. I've transacted in the past, very small transactions, back and forth with Bitcoin and whatnot. I think there's some very good use cases.
So give us an example when you used Bitcoin, besides buying some other crypto thing.
Well, I had a person. I had a trail bike, motorcycle, that I wanted to sell, and it was a college student, and he said, "Hey, will you accept Bitcoin for that?" I said, "Sure." So I sent him the QR code to my digital wallet. Mm-hmm. He made the deposit, and everything was fine. So had no issues with it. It transacted fine. But I'll tell you, I'm probably like 90% of most Americans or people who deal or who experiment with crypto, I should say, is I always send a little bit before I send a lot.
Yeah.
I
do that too.
Yeah.
But then you do the copy and paste thing, and you hope that it copies and pastes correctly for when you send the big amount.
Yeah, the hard part now is, let's just say you screw something up with your credit card. You can call your bank and get it unscrewed. You screw something up in digital currency, who are you calling to unscrew it? It's kind of difficult. Or let's say every time you made a transaction, so you go to Macy's to buy a new shirt, and you say, "Hey, I want to make sure this really works for us. Here's a penny. Let me watch that penny flow all the way through to my account." Okay, yep, it transacts fine. Okay, here's the other $19.99 for the shirt. So you could never do business like that, right? But we have to get beyond that. We have to get to more trust. We have to get to more accessibility. There's a ton of stories of people losing thousands and millions of dollars because they lost their treasure, or they lost a hard drive, and there was somebody in England that was going to dig up a landfill because there was allegedly $200 million worth of Bitcoin on some hard drive in there or something. I don't know, but there's some crazy stories. But you know what? If somebody had buried $200 million or whatever the number was of gold in that landfill,
hell yeah.
You bet you. I was going to say you bet you or whatever, but you bet you're behind that people would be in there trying to dig it up, right? So because it's value, and it has value, it's tangible. So
do you see it as like, I kind of joke about it, but with the the coronavirus or whatever's going on, the shit hits the fan. Some people have gold. My parents, they have freaking gold bars in their house. But I joke, but I sort of mean it. I mean, it's another thing to have in your back pocket if things go wrong, right? Don't you think?
So I think, mind you, I'm not a certified financial advisor, so take this with a grain of salt. I think people should have a very diverse portfolio to help offset whatever the thing is, whether it's a run on gold, whether it's a pandemic or whatever. Having a diversification is protection and allows you to de-risk. I think it's just another way to de-risk. You used to be able to watch when the market was down, the crypto was up, and so on.
But now it's
they're running in parallel now, which is amazing, right? Just a couple of years into it. So, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space. What I probably people should focus on is, again, there's tremendous value to be made. There's tremendous new business models to be created when you can unmoor crypto from its foundational blockchain. And that's really, kind of where our focus has been, is we've unmoored it from crypto, and we're out creating this value in the aerospace sector and in the aerospace vertical. And that's kind of, that's our story. But I do much appreciate you taking the time to.
Oh, thank you so much. It's fascinating. And I learned a lot. I think our listeners will learn a lot and be baffled by a lot, and that's normal.
If I can give a plug, if anybody's got questions.
Plug away.
Yeah, if anybody's got questions, please reach out. You'll find our email address on the website, or you can reach out to Jim at Veritx, Veritx.co. I'm happy to answer those questions. If you got suppliers out there that are interested, right now we're trying to put together letters of intent, as we go forward to show and start to build out catalog. Eventually we'll be, uploading catalog, but looking for people who want to create value and looking for like-minded people who are innovators. And I very much appreciate being able to share our story.